your story is so inspirational in terms of like how you navigated through this space. And I think one of the things I'm really curious about are your insights after these years of working in, uh, with nonprofit brands, and huge multinational brands and also hyper local brands, because you don't just
Right.
have experience dealing with your clients, but also experience dealing with the clients of your client's business. And what I find fascinating about nonprofit work is how often you'll see people who are passionate about environmentalism or housing rights or animal welfare, but once you dig into their politics, you'll find that they care more about animal lives or clean oceans than the lives of marginalized people. Obviously, it's not like your coworkers will tell you to your face that they're Trump voters or anything like that, but through their ideologies, um, they oftentimes seep into forms of implicit bias, which
Yes.
impacts who they think they need to help or who they think is deserving of a promotion. In your line of work, where do these forms of implicit bias flare up?
Oh gosh. Wow, that is a that's a really big question. And the simple answer is just like everywhere else around the country, implicit bias shows up everywhere. There is absolutely nothing more insidious, I think, on this planet than structural racism, white supremacy, colonialism. People, I think, unreflectively and unthoughtfully follow the crown, follow the princes and queens of England, not understanding that these are the people who incentivize people like Hitler um, to wage mass homicide. And the difference between a Hitler and the British crown is Hitler lost. And that's the only difference. And so I don't think that people understand, had Hitler won 100 years later, we would be, not I, but most people would be clamming around, following Hitler's great grandchildren as they got married. And
Mm-hmm.
so we don't think about it in the true context of what it really is, which is white supremacy that's undergirded by genocide. And in this country, there is no American history that's not connected to the genocide of brown people. Um, and so, because we don't recognize it, the biases that we have are everywhere. They're in every profession. But I think in animal welfare in particular, they show up. Animal welfare is a very interesting field in of itself. When you combine it with animal retail space, you're talking about somewhere around $150 billion sort of hidden industry, and it's not regulated at all. So you might know, for instance, you may not know someone that is a doctor like yourself. You may not know someone that is a lawyer yourself. Um, you might not even know someone that is an athlete, a professional athlete, but you and almost everyone else listening knows someone that has a pet. So the fact that's how ubiquitous the animal welfare field is. But it has almost no BACPOC leadership whatsoever. The field, like I said, is unregulated. Um, it's about 85% women. It's about 84% white women, and that includes the boards of directors are almost entirely white. And there's enormous amounts of money that flow inside of this field. And so when you think about pet adoption, which I think is the most, I would say that's probably the most public facing part of animal welfare is animal adoption. The other very public facing part of animal welfare would be animal control, animal care and control. Um, Most communities have animal care and control, but so that's the policing side of animal welfare. And if you think of a town like Baltimore or Dallas that's still incredibly segregated, when you're in those wealthier communities, you don't get a sense of animal control because no one's policing wealthy communities. So no one is chasing down someone that's living in a community where the housing comparables are in the 250,000 plus, right? There might be a leash law in that community, but no one's policing it. Whereas if you go to the south side of Chicago or you go to southern Baltimore, really east west Baltimore, or South Dallas, all of a sudden animal control is very present. Where if you go to those other nicer areas, you don't see it. So when I say public facing, animal control is part of public health. It is part of most jurisdictional regulations, but mostly only poor folks see animal control officers, not wealthy folks. So in that way, that bias constantly shows up. If you lose your animal, for instance, and you go to pick it up from animal control, and you can't pay the fine to bring your own animal back, they can keep it. uh, and Prince George County here here, and that's not Baltimore, it's right outside of Baltimore, Prince George, Maryland. Breed specific legislation is still a thing. So it's so severe that you cannot drive through Prince George County with a pit bull in your car. If officers see the pit bull in your car, they can take the dog and they can euthanize the dog because pit bulls are not allowed in Prince George County. Uh, and the reason for that is simply because as pit bulls have become more popular with brown and black folks, they have all of a sudden become more dangerous. But when they were simply the pets of white folks, i.e., the little rascals, that's a pit bull. That's a pit bull like breed. The dog was fine and was always known to be loyal and gentle. And so Southern white men made dogfighting popular, by the way. But as urban Black and Hispanic men have taken on the craft, and of course, not all of them, now all of a sudden the dog is inherently dangerous. But the only thing that's dangerous about it is its owner, its perceived owners, not the dog itself. And so you see that kind of thing showing up all the time in animal welfare. And then on the adoption side, um, it is pretty clear that if you have a brown sounding name or you're living in a brown zip code, that you are less likely to be adopted to. And so CARE is in the process of adding science to that. We're doing a long-term research project with the University of Tennessee to find out specifically not only where the bias shows up, but how bad is the data coming back that shows, excuse me, that shows that people of color are being over policed, and not being adopted to. So it shows up in every form, but those are the three places I think are the most heinous. Well, four. One, the lack of leadership in animal welfare. There's almost no BIPOC leadership. Care is an outlier, to say the least. Adoption is certainly where bias shows up, and animal control is certainly another place where bias shows up. And in the retail space, there are almost no retail products. In a $99 billion industry, there are almost no BIPOC owned products in an animal space.
Wow.
Yeah, it's so draconian. If you want to find the last vestiges of racism in this country, it's not in the legal profession, it's not in the medical profession, it's not that it's not there. It's in animal welfare. It's everywhere because there are almost no people of color here. Imagine the music scene without um, Little Richard or without Little Nas X. Imagine the sports world without Michael Jordan. Imagine the civil rights world without Dr. King. without um, without Barack Obama, without Ms. Abrams. I mean, that's what animal welfare looks like. It's a world without Black leadership.
Wow. I mean, I was, thinking that this was just gonna like you're gonna talk about sort of the day-to-day implicit biases, but I mean, you really sort of opened my mind in how systemic this is, because I didn't even fully make the connection about how we really do you know see dogs as this extension of ourselves, and because of that, we can treat people based and dogs essentially based off of who we think they are associated with.